First off, I'll start with a straight apology if I get a bit slack and loose with my terminology here. Feel free to slap me for my rather layperson approach to the use of words. But I'll try and clear up any definitions as I go along. Now, knowing most groups like this, there's usually a need for everybody to kind of blow off a little bit of intellectual steam at the beginning. So let's see. Come on. What we might do, group exercise. No, rather than the precepts, I think most people will be in for kind of what's a definition of culture. So I don't know if people want to throw some thoughts into the chat. Or if anybody's got a really strong feeling of what culture is. It has relevance in the later on, but I feel it's one place where we probably need to kind of clear up what people, you're free to change your minds later on, but it's just, what do people think organizational culture is? I'm conscious I work in lots of different places and lots of different people have different ideas about what a culture is. I'm not going to tell you what I think at the moment. I'm just wondering what thoughts other people might have. Interesting to see if we feel where we are resonates towards the end. So I know Tony's pitched this as causation. This is a little bit of a bastardization of something I presented at a different conference. So it's a little bit pitched more towards the idea of root cause analysis, which, let's see, I need to focus back on the right place. So kind of one of the first questions is, why do we call it 5 whys, which is kind of another euphemism we use for root cause analysis? Because in Sakichi Toyoda's original example, there were actually 7 whys before he got to his root cause. So somebody somewhere, and I've not found who it was, kind of truncated it to 5. His original proposal was you just keep asking why. There wasn't specifically a stop at 5. It's a keep going until you get to something that seems like a fundamental sort of unalterable fact of life, as to what it's all about. So maybe we don't ask enough whys when we're using this. People do tend to stop at 5. I've seen people struggle to get past 3 sometimes, and it's just not thinking hard enough, perhaps. Little bit of the roots, the other thing, so what's in a name? Accident, mishap, problem. Do we talk about solutions, or Toyota talked about countermeasures, which leans back more to Aikoff's principle of dissolving a problem rather than solving or absolving. And picking up another one, a little Aikoff's quote there about managing a system effectively, looking at the interactions rather than the specific parts. So a lot of my background's in to relate to it. An unfortunate part of this is involved what we would classically call accident investigation. So we're very quick to stop when we find blame, when we can point a finger at a person and go, you made a mistake. Now, I also, in the nature of a lot of the work I do, we also do joyous things called human factor analysis or human task analysis, or any one of the associated exciting things like that, where we talk about the probability of a person making a mistake, which you assume the person's going to make a mistake, but then when you look at the mishap, whatever its nature be, quality problem, something goes wrong, we're always very quick to provide agency to the person who did it and go, you made a mistake. Not accepting that there are other factors that come into play. Why do we get into the blame? Is it about, going back to ACOS way of doing, is it about absolving ourselves of having created a poor system that encourages effectively the person to make the mistake? I've been involved with things where the things that the person who's been blamed has done is it's hard to work out why a normal human being wouldn't take the same thing. I'll give you a particularly extreme example. It was resulted in pollution of a river. They had to sit and hold down a button for 25 minutes while a vehicle was unloaded. So what they tended to do was roll up a ball of tape and then tape it down on the button so that they could walk away and do it, because it's pretty painful to hold your thumb down on a button. If you imagine trying to fill your petrol tank for 25 minutes, it's not something that a person is going to do. So does that cause the kick in of the law of unintended consequences, which actually creates three problems that you're not really expecting and are perhaps a bit blindsided by? So what might a better root cause approach look like? So one company who, for reasons of reasonable commercial confidentiality, shall remain nameless, has one that's basically their 5 whys really come down through 5 different levels. Now, this is first apology for fast and loose with terms. They talk about systems causes, and I'm literally using their language. And by that, they usually mean the management system, e.g., what went wrong. In their examples, when they get to that, they're going, was the person not trained? Why wasn't the person trained enough? Why did we hire the wrong person? And it's really a huge attempt to remove blame from the person who did it. It's to accept that there is inherent human fallibility. The trip down at incident, what was happened. Leading causes are things that led up to this. It might only have happened because it was a rainy day. It might only have happened because the delivery was at the wrong time of day. Assorted number of things that might not be the normal. Immediate causes are usually the obvious last thing. Something broke, something failed, something. What are the basic causes? Again, they're trying to look a little bit back into the detail. Something broke because it wasn't maintained. Somebody hadn't kept up with the maintenance schedule. So if somebody hadn't kept up with the maintenance schedule, why did that happen? People are too busy. Systemic cause, we have an understaffed maintenance department. They don't have time to do it. So it isn't the fault of the person who was there when the machine broke. Actually, systemically, we'd undermined the equipment that they're working on. So this is an approach that tries to come a little bit deeper. So can we perhaps find what I call socio-technical explanation as to why you might want to look at root cause a little bit more like this? So if we take it that it's a socio-technical system and that the social system and the technical system also have underlying bits, we have 4 interactions rather than 2. The obvious ones, or starting in the bottom right, the technical social thing is, you can look at that as the output of our system, where the technology, the process, does its output into the social system. So if you're thinking of a factory, it's where our product goes into goes to interact with human beings. The technical, that's the machinery, that's the equipment put together. The social technical, in some places, might be referred to as the human-machine interface. It's where the person does he moves levers, turns switches, presses buttons. That's where the human being makes the unthinking, as it were, technical part of the system do what they want them to do. And then the social bit, if you're anything other than the smallest, well, the smallest one is you working for yourself, is in the interactions between the human beings within the social part of that system. So what does that look like if you have an event? So counting backwards, if it's unintended, let's work for this unintended thing. Number 3 is your accident. That's where your technical system has had an undesired effect on your social system. So just put it in context, a lot of my background's in the chemical industry. People usually get spectacularly impressed when we do something or paranoid because it tends to be something nasty, even if the consequences are quite low. Although, just to put this in context, not completely the inspiration for this. It's been 40 years since Bhopal, so that's when my industry background, when we screw it up, it tends to be quite spectacular. But that's the bad thing. This is when my system does something that I don't want to, but that's its impact on mine and or a greater social system. Something breaks in the technical system. So obviously, if it's been designed properly or even working as intended, then the technical system should do what it's intended to do. So that's fine. So something in the technology has failed, deliberately, accidentally, for whatever reason. But that failure is almost inevitably caused by some action in the social system, something that a human being has done. That's where we normally stop. That's our blame. We've blamed something. We've gone, oh, that person pressed the wrong button, that person did, whatever. But as we've talked about before and looking at it, we're not in the system. And really, we have, if you noticed, there's nothing in the social aspect of that. So we put something into the box and we go, something's happened in the social system, something's happened in that human interaction. What's happened in that space that's caused the person to either make a mistake or to increase the likelihood that they've made that mistake? Now, first question is, are we just blame shifting? Are we just going, it's the boss's fault, he made me do it, right? I don't think that's the right space. But what does that social interaction space represent? What's going on in there? Because if we don't know, then we are effectively just trying to absolve people. Short answer, people are in there. And what we've got is human interaction. It's behaviors. It's the way people behave towards each other. It's the way they engage with each other. And this will get I'll hapt it to Stafford Beer. This is the algedonic stuff. This is where it feels. There's a lot of this about how you make people feel. These are the hidden emotional responses that are going around. If you're having poor interactions that are causing people to feel stressed, well, the behavior of particularly of the boss towards the other person, are they feeling stressed? Are they feeling under pressure? If you think of particularly feelings as modes of operation, I think it's really nicely described as by a psychologist. If a person's feeling afraid, it dictates their behavior. So they may be afraid to do something wrong. I don't know if anybody watched the mini-series on Chernobyl. It's fascinating if you haven't. I've saw one nod of the head. If you remember the last episode, there is a part where effectively the chief engineer is about to push on with the test. Somebody challenges them about carrying on because, going back to the idea of leading events, the preconditions are not exactly as are assumed in the procedure. And he fundamentally shouts him down. And then there are other people that agree that they should probably stop. Everybody feels threatened that if they, I could lose my job, or, something terrible could happen to me if I challenge that person. And because nobody felt safe, they went into a fear mode of operation, obey the instructions, do what I'm told. And, we all kind of know where Chernobyl went after that. So is there anything that is then influencing our behaviors if it's a mode of operation thing? Well, we can argue that it's recursive, much like a viable system. That are what we think of as social interactions is actually another socio-technical system. Now, it's not obvious, but the technical loop in that are things like policies, procedures, structures that influence how I can interact with you. There's also, I would start to suggest, that's when we're talking about culture, is embedded in that invisible technical aspect of things, people's expectations of how people will behave and how people will interact. Perhaps the deepest thing is we can possibly recurse another level, and that social is not just between two of us, it's actually our internal dialogue. And that technical part is our belief system. So where we have our internal belief system overlapping with with that technical system, or effectively becomes our collective internalized belief systems about how we operate or organize as a group, that's our culture, which can be phrased many other ways, but there is an element of what is our deep shared belief system. How do I believe you're going to react? What do I believe the consequence of? Human beings being fundamentally predictive creatures, we're parsing ahead as to what's going to happen. If I do this, what are the consequences going to be? So can we call culture a shared belief system? So is the tail wagging the dog to an extent here? We create the culture by developing that shared belief system. We create that and often it's unspoken. We do it based on how somebody reacted before, not necessarily on how, a certain, without taking care of the context. Which leads to the question, where really is the root of the problem? So I think I saw somebody scroll down, but perhaps we can look at a different way of classifying some of those later, those deeper bits, rather than just calling it RC, but what were not just the technology causes, but what were the human causes, and really getting down at the bottom about what are the latent human causes, what were our beliefs that caused this to happen, not just the person that did it, but what was our collective cultural belief system that really created this. Now, I think that's a better theoretical framework for a different way of looking at at root causes. It doesn't remove the need to find what caused the mechanical failure, but then it's finding the cause of that and cause of that. And deeper down, it often, it may be, if you get to looking at the individual who did it and the company culture, there's a dissonance between what they might believe they should have been doing and what the organization believes they're doing. And then the question is, why did those two not match? Tip, if you're quite happy to share the slide later, is there can be multiple whys within each level. It's not one in that and move down. So you might find there are various causes before you slip down through each one. And that, as they say, is that. Notice people have been scribbling merrily.
Questions? Did anyone react like me and went, "Oh my God, he said the word root causes"?
Yeah. Yeah.
The thing we're not supposed to believe in.
Yeah, I kind of went past that because, yeah, that's all right. It's Ed and we're forgiven. But I mean, having done some of this, and I worked a bit with a Japanese-owned company, and we had one of the masters of root cause of 5 whys. Didn't know that I needed to ask him why it wasn't 7, but damn, missed that opportunity. And I've done it quite a bit. And what you notice is you're very often wrong. You very often bark down the wrong tree, and it's really important to go, no, that's not it. Throw that away, start again. And I think that's kind of ties into, Tony's comment about, oh my God, root causes. So I think it's a multiple instance exercise. You've got to do it lots of times just in case.
Yeah, there is a real temptation of, my goodness, I don't tend to lean into this directly as a methodology, but it is quite, 5 whys, I know that, because it seems to crop up in, I'm sorry, I'm going to start swearing now, 6 Sigma, in Lean, and it's like, I've heard of 5 whys, and it's like, okay, first off, it shouldn't be 5 whys, and you've got to just keep asking until you run out. And I'm a particular pain in the posterior when it comes to that, because I don't usually like people's answers. Well, it broke because it was old. Okay, so why was it old? I was visited on by my children, as my mother always says happens. They were very good with the why question. So I just kind of put my 3-year-old hat on and just go, why, and just keep asking until people really are completely exhausted. And other thing you pick up on there, Ross, is that sometimes it branches. There can be multiple explanations to it. I know particular scenario I was thinking about that I was involved in wasn't a root cause. We're actually using a fishbone, and we all got dragged into this from various different parts of the company, and we looked at it and we said, well, this is probably what it is. And they went, nah, it's too damn obvious. Like, it was just one product we were producing, they were having problems with, and going, well, it isn't a problem on the other ones. And so we went off and we tried to dig down, using the fishbone as an all sort of alternative, and came up with all these ones. They literally dug their way through, and somebody said, oh, well, damn it, let's go and test to see if the thing is running backwards. And lo and behold, yes, it was. Because if anybody's ever had any experience wiring up 3-phase motors, they have a really remarkable habit of running the wrong way. And fans still suck a bit when they're running the wrong way. They just don't suck enough, which was ultimately the problem. So if we went and looked at the damn obvious thing first, it would have worked. But yeah, so you're right, people tend to go down an obvious answer. I can pick most of the incident investigations I've been involved in, and usually the first reason people think it is wrong. Usually. So, including the health and safety executive, but I'll try not to besmirch their name, because we tend to go down a route that we think is path of least resistance, looks obvious, we have an explanation. It's not dig deeper. It branches in those layers. There could be multiple things that contribute to it.
I think that's really important, isn't it? That I still underestimate how much people already want a certain answer for anything like this. You know, you just the kind of and they're really uncomfortable with other answers because it doesn't match something else that they already believe or wish for, something like that. You know, but yeah, that's a really powerful thing, I think, Ed. Yeah.
I think it's about maturity as well of the organisation and being able to collectively come to an understanding that their individualised views aren't the view, and actually challenging that assumption. That's one of the hardest things I find. The amount of times I have that conversation of, yes, but we know what good looks like, and I keep saying, no, actually, I don't think we do. I think you do, but I don't think we do. You know, so that's something I encounter daily, I would say.
Ken asks a question, which is an interesting one, which is how can you try and visualize all of this? I mean, obviously, when some of us are dabbling with systems thinking tools, we will sort of jump into causal loop diagramming and influence maps and stuff like that. Is there anything that you've tended to use that you find works with people, Ed, that they can get their heads around, that isn't too scary?
I think sometimes, well, I think if you layer out, either use the first one or the second one, that doesn't, probably the first one's easier for people to grasp with, and just go, we're not going to stop when we find a person to blame, or we're not going to stop when I find that the widget broke. We're going to find out why the widget broke. We're going to find what contributed to the widget breaking. And they can see, and people often get a lot more relaxed if you turn around and go, and we're going to find something, as the layman thinks, that broke in the system. There's some kind of procedure or policy that's not right. It makes them, and I think even giving them that long stretch goal allows them to keep seeing the whys, because then they're trying to connect it back to something. It's almost like a subconscious challenge to try and find what part of the organization contributed to it. And the wider you can spread that, because even if, you know, somebody goes, oh, well, you know, the maintenance people didn't maintain it. It's like, okay, why didn't they? Did we not recruit the right people? Did we not? A lot of organizations find it quite scary, because if you want to know where the finger of blame ends departmentally, typically, it's in HR.
Interesting. Which, of course, is not where most people would look for a production issue.
Yeah, it's, you know, we have done, which if you look at it, it's how the organization handles its internal social system. Yeah, have we recruited the wrong people? Have we encouraged? And we didn't provide the training. Of course, it's because HR ends up holding the people budget. That's one of the reasons. That's where the finger tends to come back to. But it does change corporate visions or corporate sense of what the people side of the business is about. When you look at it, you know, people are just, they're kind of extra machines. It's very easy for senior management to just view the humans as a machine, but somehow a machine that can deliberately choose to malfunction.
Yeah, that's a bizarre notion, isn't it?
It is. I was going to say, fortunately, I haven't actually had to deal with any that have resulted in a dead person, but it's quite complicated when you're sitting there going through it and you're going, the person who ended up injured deliberately did this to injure themselves. I cannot understand whose train of thought is happy about that. But it just stops a real, we're okay, it's their fault. That's it. And it's like, no, there are bigger issues at stake here.
Mm.
I generally, in a lot of the areas where I've used this, it gets quite warm reception because we are known as what is the high hazard industry. And if there is anything that's more embarrassing than that is actually killing somebody, because it tends to make the news. One of the incidents I was involved in a long time ago, we were literally only kept off the front page of the newspaper. You can date this really easily if anybody has an interest. It's because British Rail managed to crash 2 trains in the Severn Tunnel on the same night.
Oh.
We didn't kill anybody, they didn't kill anybody, but it was more newsworthy that 2 trains got crashed rather than we managed to paint the countryside blue. That was, otherwise we would literally have been front page news.
Mm.
That's interesting in itself, isn't it? That our bandwidth for a scandal is 1, if you know what I mean. That's kind of interesting, isn't it? Already, yeah. Have to get away with something. Yeah.
Blame breeds drama.
Yeah.
Whereas an understanding of no, there was something more fundamental going on doesn't breed drama, and is nothing for the newspapers to make a noise about. So, and to use a controversial name, I do remember going to a quality conference a long time ago when John Seddon stood up and said that the purpose of the social system in Lambeth was to kill babies. You can imagine the sharp intakes of breath that resulted from that. And he said, it doesn't matter all the blame machine or anything else that happened. That was what the system did. It allowed baby P to die. And he really, that really got to the heart of the fact that you couldn't blame one person. It was a combination of things that conspired, if you like, or worked together to cause death. And it was very controversial when he said it. Very controversial. But he was trying to get to the point that blame doesn't help to resolve issues. And I'm sure the same is very true, isn't it, Sharon? In health service, there is a real huge determination to find blame for any death, for any issue, whether it's from someone who's not competent or not properly trained to do something to someone who actually acts in a callous or difficult way. It's always, who can we blame? We don't go beyond that. I don't know.
It is very difficult, but it's people forget. That's the tricky thing with organizations. They'll have an accident, they'll quite often be a big shift in attitude, and then you have a change of personnel and attitudes change. I've tried to leave little sprinkles, and it's very fortunate. One of the companies I work for that seemed to be particularly prone initially to accidents is based on the outskirts of Liverpool, and I mean this in the most loving possible way, but Scouts are incredibly lazy. E.g., if there's an easier way to do something, they will find it. Incredibly inventive, and I always said we'd put in, people determined to put these things in. It's like, oh, we don't want them to do that, so we'll put a roadblock in the way. So don't design it so that the right way to do it is the easiest way to do it. Instead of going, oh, I want to put a roadblock over there. But it's like, if that's the right way, you've actually made it difficult. Although it prevents them doing it the wrong way, it's still, the right way is still difficult. Make it so the right way is easy. And that shifts the blame back on the designer.
Yes.
It's quite scary. There's not a lot of people who like to think about it like that, because the purpose of the system is what it does. If it's not doing what the designer intended, and I'm hacking my sort of deep personal perspective more from the factory point of view, but if it's not doing what I designed it to do, then I did something wrong. And it's sometimes very difficult to see how sometimes cumulative little tweaks here and there by people end up twisting the intent of a design that creates a problem.
I think in health and social care as well, you've got short-termism and nothing ever gets completed. So nothing is joined to something else in some way. There's a nod to it, but there's no depth to it. So if you've got, for example, a brand new IT system coming in, it'll be led by IT, who will at a stage talk with people and say, what do you want it to do? And then say, no, it can't do that, because they've already gone so far down that journey, because it's all been IT that have done that, because they know their language.
Interesting.
Yeah, I'll try not to leap into the where designers should be. That's not. I'll not put that hat on and beat that drum. Anybody? Any more questions? I'm quite happy to share these slides. They're not.
Are they green, Ed, or they?
Yeah, they're green. There's nothing.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
As I, if you're going to share them, might need to remove the notes from them, because there is a reference to a particular company in there that probably shouldn't be. That was just.
Do that. We do it as PDF
Yeah.
anyway, so that they won't be shared as the original slides. There will be PDFs with just the slides.
Yeah. So there's nothing. Yeah, there's nothing in there that's proprietary at any level. So I think that for me, it's just saying, if you try to talk to most people about it as a socio-technical system, yeah, this is about understanding how you get there, but it's just the reality that somewhere in there, it's about what do we believe, because that has shaped your procedures, your policies, your cultures, what the person does. All these collective things build up, and it ends up with the accident at the top. Now, that might, on the nice ones, that might be a poor quality product. In the bad ones, that's dead person or persons. Just to kind of close out, because at the moment, they believe Bhopal was caused by somebody deliberately doing something wrong, which would be an incredible act of agency. Whereas most people who've been involved, and as Tony was saying, blame makes drama, it's more spectacular. When people have done a more serious forensic investigation, it's actually, it looks like they did something that was perfectly acceptable, and there were, as we like to call them, latent faults, e.g. things that you don't realize are broken until they're challenged, and then it's a mess.
Ed, I had a question. And first of all, thanks for this. And I was really enjoying the bringing of culture into this. That was something I hadn't thought about in this space. That was great. When you were talking, I was thinking about the difference between common cause and special cause, which I've seen people struggle with sometimes when it's a very serious thing that goes wrong, if you know what I mean. There's a tendency to try and rewire everything for the one event. I just wondered if that comes up for you at all as a meaningful difference or not, if you know what I mean.
I think you have to be careful. For me, a lot of the time when often it's fairly clear. It's either, look, the system is set up and it's broken and this is going to happen repeatedly, and but that's what I would describe as low risk events. You're going to keep making bad widgets because the machine is going to keep making bad widgets because it drifts out of spec, and if you don't change it, so that's easy, right? That's people can. There is a space of gray zone, but as I say, where the core bit of my work, which is in the chemical industry, it gets really easy. We have set levels of tolerability for risk. This is what's the risk that you can target that's going to result in the death of a person. Right? That's set down by the HSE. So even if it is special cause, this is unusual, but we can work it out. We can put a fuzzy wuzzy probability on it. And that's a whole art form in itself. And the number doesn't look good, you still fix it.
Mhm.
Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you. Yeah.
Ed, can I
Helpful.
ask about something which I'm just questioning what sort of technology it is? When I was sort of doing a lot of stuff around quality, and we're trying to sort of say, well, how can you have fewer issues that you can even get to a course? Everyone used to go on about poka-yoke or mistake proofing. Is mistake proofing technology, social, or some combination of the two?
I'd say it's a combination of the two, but if you look at it from the, if you like, the causation point of view, it's almost a people thing. And this is where it's not just the guy turning the handle, it's the guy designing the machine.
Hmm.
And the organization supports him. Are they going to underinvest? Is capital costs got to be kept really low? Are there confines? It's like, if you can't buy the best, right? If you're going to buy a secondhand, I'm going to really show myself. If you can buy a secondhand Trabant, right, versus a brand new Bentley, right, you're going to get what you buy, and there's a limit to how much quality built in that you're going to get out of the cheap one, out of the expensive one.
Hmm.
And the choice might purely be on how much the company prepared. There might be other restrictions. There might be genuinely no money in the bank, but there might be a belief system that we don't need to buy the better one.
Hmm.
My leaning is more safety, but I used to see that. In fact, one company, we had to change the way we went through it, because we would do the design, we would put all the systems in, and then the bean counting heads would remove most of the safety systems, and then we would go back and we would do the risk reviews, and they would all end up back in again, and then they would complain that the projects were over budget. It's going, if you just left the stuff in there in the first place, you'd have something that was designed fit for purpose. Yeah, but there's that belief system of the in-between people who just thought we put stuff in for fun and they could reduce the cost. Common cause and special cause, because the common causes to produce the product, we were going, these are the special causes, but they are intolerable risks that are related to them.
I like that. I like this idea of intolerable risk is a really good one.
It might be an infrequent event, but it cannot happen.
Yeah. So in the risk world, you have three definitions. You have broadly acceptable. So if it happens, the consequences and the frequency, it's like, yeah, I don't mind. It's not a bad thing. I'd rather it didn't. You could go to control it, but it's like, it's generally uneconomic to control it below that level. If you haven't read the Health and Safety at Work Act and you have any interest in legislation, it is a fantastic piece of legislation, incredibly simple, but probably the most powerful piece of legislation ever written in the UK, possibly in the world. It has a concept in it called "so far as is reasonably practicable," which is translated usually by the practitioners into "as low as is reasonably practicable." So a LARP, which you'll hear a lot of risk practitioners will talk about a LARP, so as low as is reasonably practicable, which is slightly a misnomer, because what it should be, because everyone goes, oh, but just make it a LARP. But the definition is, but it's tolerable if it's as low as reasonably practical. It's a tolerable risk if you reduce that. So you can grasp onto the idea of a value of a statistical life. So there's the Ministry of Transport and various other people put a estimated value on the statistically average human life. And then you look at the probability of killing them. And then you say, how much money do I need to spend to prevent killing that person or injuring them, depending on the cost of the injury. Because you can't work it out if you don't. I know it can be an upsetting thing for people to go, but you put a value on a life. It's like, but you have to, because otherwise you can't work out how much spending you're going to do. And you have to work out what the damage to the economy is of losing a human being. Ministry of Transport use it to work out what they do with road safety improvements. You know, we use it with working out. And if you want your benchmark for tolerability of risk, it's the probability of dying in a car crash, because that is a socially acceptable level of risk. We have, wittingly or unwittingly, created a belief that getting into your car and accepting the benefits for having automotive transport versus the risk of dying in a car is a tolerable level. So that's a accepted belief. It's a, is there any difference with the US system? In what sense? Yes, say more. That's an interesting question. Go on, Papa.
Well, I think the value of a life is set by trial juries. So I think they'll take it to court, and that's where it's decided. It's not decided through the legislation as you've described it as being actually thought about in advance. It's really interesting.
So litigation and precedent then defines it.
The US system is very different to here. So the value used in the UK is set by the HSE. You can take a civil action if a company could demonstrate that it operated tolerably, in the tolerable if alarm region or broadly acceptable, and the accident happened, that would actually be their defense. They have not committed a criminal offense. So that would be their defense in a civil case. The American system, every state has a slightly different screwy legal system, and yeah, trying to do risk stuff over there is a nightmare, because you can't really bring a criminal defense to a civil case in the US the same way you can over here. If you just got really mega unlucky, it's actually an event that shouldn't really happen, and you prove it all. The HSE says yes, you were just unlucky. The stars all aligned and you were very unlucky and something happened, and you then took a civil case. The defense would just walk in and go, we were just unlucky, and you wouldn't get anywhere in the UK because you were as low as is reasonably practical, or so far reasonably practical, right? You couldn't have done anything more and avoided that event.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Ed, thank you. That was really interesting, and not a subject we often get to glimpse at, but an interesting take on it. And I think the socio-technical system pieces and versus the technical is a really interesting piece for us to think about going forwards. Thank you so much.
Yeah, just wonder if anybody has any thoughts to add to it. This has all been a sort of relatively recent crash in the brain, so if anybody has anything they want to add to it, please get in touch. This is not a finished works by any means.